to be here. It's the first day of our federal Congress, and as we're going to hear soon, there are things getting busy elsewhere as well, or not. We'll hear what they have to say. We have a lot of different kinds of programs. Our Muleskinners club has a wide array of interests. I don't think anything is more important than the kind of thing we're doing today, to hear from our local reps. The last time we had the newbies, Greg Bush and Stephen Weber, who's new to the Senate. And this time we have our hardened, wizened veterans to inform us. They've agreed with Kathy, who just walked in, who could introduce them, but I will go ahead and do it because they need no introduction. They have agreed to give us about 10, possibly 15 minutes, talk about their pre-filing and anything else they want to say about the upcoming session, or God forbid, the past one. And we always, as we found out last time, we always have too many questions for these folks because we love them, we support them. I think it's the same way on the other side as well. And whatever they want, however they want to introduce themselves, people well known to us, but maybe not to everybody watching the YouTube. We will start off with Kathy Stenhoff, the state rep for District 45 in our state legislature. Kathy.
That's how we do it. Well, let me start by thanking you all for having us here today, and thanking you for all that you did to help in this last election. I know that we all probably feel the same way after that, and you know, we as reps don't have much choice. We have a job to do. We have to get down there to Jeff City and do some work. But I appreciate the fact that you all have not given up as well, and you're continuing. We're kind of, you know, having to look at where we are right now and just move forward and do the best we can. So thank you for having me here to share with you some of the bills that I intend to file this year. Many of you already know that my background is in teaching. And so most of the bills that I'm filing are really education related bills. The first bill is House Bill 305. It is a bill I filed last year that has to do with early childhood special education. And it did receive a hearing last year, and it got voted unanimously out of committee. It just didn't make it in time to be able to get on anything, but I'm really optimistic that it might go someplace this year. I think one of the things that many of you understand is that really for it to go someplace, it probably needs a Republican that will champion it and potentially file the same bill. And I'm hopeful that that will happen with this bill. I'm happy to give more details, but I also, you know, don't want to bore you with details if it doesn't matter to you. I will say quickly for that bill, as I said, it has to do with special education. Many of you are aware of special education. When a student qualifies, they qualify within a certain category, and that category determines the services that they get. But when children are really, really young, it's hard to give them a test that's kind of designed for how they learn when they're almost too young to perform well on those sorts of tests. And when I say perform well, to truly diagnose where their disability lies. And so they get a classification called young child developmental delay. So it's basically saying this child is behind in some way. We don't really know how or why. And it's a federal program that allows that child to get services under YCDD. The federal government says it can go up as high as age 9, but it's up to the states to decide. And our state has decided age 5. So I'm trying to extend those services by a year with this bill. I believe there's like 38 other states that have already done it. Then another bill that I'm filing is, you know, it's been in the media a lot, banning cell phones. It is basically saying that in Missouri schools, that school districts have to adopt a policy that restricts use of cell phones during instruction time. It is designed to still provide local control. I think many of you have noticed that Columbia Public Schools has already done such a thing. They just did it recently. So it's kind of like matching what they have done. Not wanting one size fits all across our entire state, but just saying that you know your districts better, you know your districts well, but statistics data is showing us that students are not learning when they have that distraction available to them at any time. The day after I filed that bill, the United States Department of Education put out recommendations that all states adopt a cell phone ban in their schools. So it was pretty timely that it happened. Then there's House Bill 307. This is a bill that I filed last year. I'm filing again. It has to do with firearm storage. Maybe some of you recall that the way that I designed this bill was looking at the NRA website and just scouring it for what does the NRA recommend as far as storage of guns. And so I crafted a bill that basically mimics their language and their recommendations. Then House Bill 308 is another one that I filed last year, and it has to do with voting, and it's directed mostly at students. So there's a high school student portion that basically excuses absences for students to vote. I have noticed that other reps and some senators have filed similar bill on that. And then the other part of it is to allow student IDs to be used from universities in order for students to use that as identification for voting. And then the last bill that I've already filed is House Bill 444, and it is to create a program called Missouri Teachers Matter, and that would be providing teachers $5,000 just because they're Missouri teachers teaching in Missouri. Serving as a recruitment and retention tool. We know that salaries for teachers are really determined at the local level, and it is based on state funding. But because state funding has remained so flat for so many years, and districts have had to figure out how to really fund schools at the same time for increasing salaries, I think it is why we are so low in teacher pay across this nation, is because the state has not put in their fair share. We've seen over the years the percentage of budget in our local districts increase by local dollars over the years. So this, to me, the state needs to be putting in a little bit more than just the foundation formula to get our salaries back to where they are. It is named for teachers. I think it's important to say, I think everybody that's working in public schools deserves more money. Our superintendents are underpaid. Our principals are underpaid. Our nurses are, school nurses are underpaid. Our secretary, I mean, I can go through the whole list. Our paraprofessionals are underpaid. But what we see is that when teachers' salaries go up, districts also match that at all of other levels. So it's a cleaner argument to try to support teachers and knowing that everybody else will fall in line. There's a few other amendments that I kind of have in the back of my head that I'm hoping we'll have a chance to offer this year, but those are the ones that I have filed so far. And I am happy to answer questions, or I don't know if you want, how you want to do it. If you
No, I think we have time for specific questions for you.
Okay.
If you don't have any further comments on the upcoming session.
Well,
hope.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I tend to be, I think, an optimistic person in the sense that I just believe the good in people is going to come out. I get that I have been surprised in a negative way lots of times, but I know that I met with the new speaker, and I'm happy to see what he brings as a change to the House. And I'm hopeful that the way the election turned out at the state level, even though we didn't get more Democrats in there like we wanted, possibly we got rid of some Republicans that were getting in the way of getting some work done.
That's great. We'd have a good 10 minutes for questions, and these people online and here always have plenty of them. And I'll ask Sarah to try to help me be fair and watch the chat.
Yep.
Of the things that you heard about or something else on your mind, what do you have to ask Kathy right now?
I wanted to clarify what you said about gun storage, because I was panicking. I didn't see Adrian online, so I was panicking to text him quickly. What you said, you followed NRA guidelines,
right?
What are those?
Well, gosh, I don't know.
The question is on gun storage.
Right. It is just talking specifically about how guns need to be stored, particularly so that children can have access to them. And also roommates, that it is not their gun, they should not be able to have access to it as well. So there's a whole list of different ways that guns can be securely stored that the NRA recommends, and I'm not really up on my gun stuff. So you all would probably know that if there's trigger locks, there's a gun safe. There was another one that's kind of escaping me right now, but there's different approved ways that the NRA suggests to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
And I might refer you to
yes,
Moms Demand Action's Be Smart program.
Yeah.
Because that has some very good guidelines for gun storage.
Yeah. And I did have Moms Demand Action review my bill before I filed it last year. Yeah. And they made some really great suggestions that I think will help it.
Sarah, will you call their names? Because I can't see it so well.
Yep. I think, I don't know who had it first, but the Tillamas, one of you have got your hands up.
Kathy, regarding your special education bill, this is just background information. How many students are currently affected by special education programs across the state as a fraction of all students? And two, what portion of Missouri education expenditures are spent on special education?
Yeah, I don't have those data that data right off the top of my head. I think it's in the 30% range that we have students that are receiving special education services. And I don't know the percentage of actual expenditures, but I do know a lot of our money that goes towards special education is coming from the federal level.
Yeah. Someone here, yes.
Kathy, on House Bill 305, what groups did you work with to create that bill?
Which bill?
305.
That's the special ed bill, right? Well, the idea came to me from a professor at Columbia College who also had been a principal in our Columbia Public Schools. She was the first one to suggest it to me because I was a secondary teacher, so this was not on my radar at all. And the question that I met with all the principals in my district, and the question I said is, when you think about things that tie your hands, you probably have those moments where you say, this is what I think is best for my kids or best for my teachers or best for my staff. But because of state law, I can't get it to happen. I said, what are some things like that? And she made this recommendation. And it really came to light during COVID because all of those students that had not been in school, they were on that, they had that YCDD category classification, but they weren't in a classroom to be able to more identify where their skill sets, were delayed. And there was concern about how we had to test all of these kids. From the practical side, that's one of the things that's happening is when students get into kindergarten, at the end of their kindergarten year, all the schools, any student that's on YCDD is being tested to decide if they qualify for services. You know this at the first grade level. And so it was the idea of how about we just delay that a year? How about we let parents transition into first grade year, let kids transition into first grade year, let our teachers that got to learn those students continue to provide the services and see what's working and what's not working, so that at the end of their first grade year, we might have a better idea of what category that they fall into. I see you nodding your head, so maybe you had more information on that.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah. But the other, you asked is who I worked with on that. So she gave me the idea. Then I worked with DESE, the Office of Early Childhood, Office of Childhood. I think of the name. And then I also had a lot of different educators look at it. Special school districts, St. Louis, I reached out to them and asked them to look at it because they have so many special ed teachers there. So.
There, I just was going to ask about the acronym.
Oh.
I just stepped in.
No, it's okay.
YCDD.
Yes, it stands for Young Child Developmental Delay. And it's a specific category of special education that is reserved for very young children. And our state cuts off services for that at the end of their kindergarten year. So my bill would extend it to the end of their first grade year. I also wanted to be very clear in my bill, and I, of course, had people who draft the bills work with how to make that language work. I wanted to also be very clear that it doesn't prohibit a child being tested for special education services, because surely there are 5-year-olds that it's very clear that they have an auditory problem, and we want to make sure that they're getting the auditory services and not in this umbrella YCDD grouping. But if they do the test for auditory and it doesn't come back, then they still have their YCDD to fall back on.
A question.
Alice has got her hand up. Alice, can you hear us? Or can you safely unmute? Be careful.
She's not driving.
She is driving. I think
She's
she's
here.
going
Right.
across.
There you go.
I'm here. Okay. So Kathy, I applaud all your bills, but the question I have is, what was in that mega teacher education bill last year that made all sorts of allusions to increasing teachers' salaries that the state passed with the horrible charter stuff, which I think up under David, because
Oh, let me
Cal
lost her.
clicked on for like 2 seconds.
Right, but I think she had more to say and I didn't.
Yeah, and now we have nothing.
But it could have been internet.
couldn't hear me.
rather than- Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out, Alice, but we can hear you right now.
Dave
Okay,
Taylor.
what did the
Interestingly,
state
the owl
promise?
picked some of them.
What did the state promise in the mega education bill in terms of
That
teacher
is-
salary increases?
Okay. The only provisions in there were the baseline teacher grant, which requires that salaries go up to, was it 40,000 this first year? 40,000. And if a district couldn't afford to pay their teachers a minimum of 40,000, then they could apply for this grant to help support them. That is not going to apply to any schools in Columbia or any of the mid-Missouri area. We're all above that level. It's not going to apply to anybody in
Right.
St. Louis. It's not going to apply. I mean, and I don't mean to make it partisan, but I will tell you, there's not a Democrat district that's going to benefit from that baseline teacher grant. And what's going to happen, I mean, I do think that teachers should be paid more than 28,000, which is what I believe the law was before this 40,000. I do believe they need to be paid more than that, but we also, it's hard to compare a teacher in Columbia with a teacher in a very, very rural area where those teachers are the highest paid people in their community. So that's as far as state funding going to teacher salaries, that's what was in that Senate Bill 727. There was a provision, I believe, that added a little bit more money to the Career Ladder program, and some stipulations for the Career Ladder program as well. But for those of you that have been teachers, I don't think you would be surprised to know that there's a lot of districts that are staying far away from Career Ladder. They got burned the last time and they're not interested in that. So my bill about Missouri Teachers Matters is really addressing, kind of do what we did with Career Ladder, but don't make teachers and districts jump through a million hoops to get the money. Just give them the money.
I see. Okay, thanks, Kathy.
I'll ask a follow-up on that too, because somehow this 5,000, the 5,000 in your bill is supposed to be, from all your vast experience talking to not only Columbia teachers, but across the state.
Right.
This is at least a way of getting something.
Right.
Do I understand that correctly?
It is. And I think the fact that it's titled Missouri Teachers Matter also sends a message. It sends a message to teachers that we value you enough that we're going to find a way to give you some money to make up for the fact that you are one of the lowest paid teachers in our country.
For our party, this sounds like a good opening to districts that seldom vote Democratic.
Yeah.
Yes, Kathy, do you see any indication that there is going to be more of an emphasis on early childhood education? Because it seems like by the time the kid gets to school, many of them are running behind in terms of especially reading and math.
Right.
And if there were more emphasis put on, like, let's say, preschool programs or even kindergarten, that might help some of the issues that are going on today.
Yes, you're exactly right. I think that we are going to see an emphasis, and we already have started to, in the world of childcare. And when we talk about childcare and how to expand that across our state, we continue to say high quality childcare. And it's not just that it helps parents get back to work, although that's a valuable tool as well. It's about getting students ready for school so that they can be more successful. And all the study, as you just said, all the studies, all the research shows what major benefits and impacts it has on not only those children's lives, the families' lives, and it's long-term. It impacts their health. It impacts their economic prosperity. It impacts their mental health. It impacts so many things. And so many things that we are paying for as a state
Later
because of problems, to your point, that we could have addressed. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that. We've seen a lot of childcare bills that have been ready to be passed that are going to be offered again this year. And I hope it goes through.
We've got a question in the chat and a hand up.
Okay, well, these will be the last two, I think.
Okay. Let's do the one from the chat first, and then we'll come to you, David. The question in the chat is from Scott Orr. He says, with the new 40,000 minimum, where is Missouri now in the ranking of teacher pay nationwide? Do you know where that'll?
I do not know where it is.
Everybody else
I
probably thinks
know.
it
I
is too.
should. Yeah, everybody. You're right. That's exactly right. I can't imagine that we'll go above the 45th. I just.
50,
Yeah, I don't think we will. And, we've got the problem of things like Arkansas. They made their minimum 50. So imagine what it's like to be in the southernmost part of Missouri, thinking I can drive across the border. And that's probably, some of those districts were probably paying 29,000. So I can drive across the border and make 50,000.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do have really going for us in Missouri is our teacher retirement system, which is so outstanding. And not every state has that sort of retirement system. But another thing people forget is that's retirement system is funded by teachers putting in their money.
Right.
The districts also put money in, but it wasn't much more of a burden on them than it would have been if it was Social Security.
And now they can also draw Social Security.
Yes. Well,
on-
I've heard January 6th is when that will be signed. The GPO web.
David.
David Leuthold, do you want to unmute? Oh, you got it. Yeah.
Yes. The question that I have is, you have a bill on the cell phones in the school. What works with regard to cell phones in schools, and what are you proposing?
My bill is proposing that students cannot have them during instructional time. It leaves the rest of the day open, and it's requiring districts to make policies around that, but with the caveat that it cannot be used for instructional time. I also in my bill made sure that there were some exceptions for like students with special education written into their special education plan. Not to mention students who just go through trauma in their lives the way the rest of us do. We've got families that, people need to be kept away from their kids, and it would make parents feel safer and kids feel safer knowing that they could get a hold of somebody at home. So giving districts an opportunity to decide this is an emergency, this child can carry a phone, the rest of these children can't. And then a leeway as to what they would do during study hall time, during passing time. I will say, though, districts that have already done it, the most success are ones that are bell-to-bell bans. Because when you just ban them in the classroom, but you allow them to have them during passing time, it's just the social aspect of life that those students are missing out on. And we're seeing it when they become workers, that they really have trouble with relationships.
Dave Taylor did some Googling, and he thinks that our average teacher pays at 45th now. Best we knew. And Scott thinks we used to be at 49th, so we may have jumped a little. Yeah.
Was there something quick, Alice? We should.
I just wondered if the recent Social Security bill that was passed by Boone are going to help our teachers in Missouri.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, it will definitely help our teachers in Missouri.
That's great.
My dad's going to be bringing home an extra $1,200 a month.
I wondered if anybody had done the calculations.
Oh, he knows.
Yeah.
Well, that is good news for our teachers who we have to support. And
Right.
we really thank you for your leadership on this, Kathy. Obviously, we could go on, but you have other things to do.
I do. I
And-
appreciate you accommodating my time schedule. Sorry, I had a previous plan.
It was your fellow reps who accommodated you, and I'm sure that you all.
They're good guys, aren't they?
I'm sure you all work on this all the time together. So thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Are you going to stay there?
As I said before, Kathy has another engagement, so we'll just let her go off, but maybe the other two will hang around for more questions later. Our second speaker is someone who has in the past been my rep. Kathy is now my rep. That's a deep redistricting coming through my area. David Tyson-Smith, the 46th now. And as before, I'll let you introduce yourself in the way you want to our YouTube audience, and again talk about pre-filing and anything else.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having this, and I'm glad to be here. And I just want to thank everyone for their hard work and all the work everyone has done locally and around the state this latest election. I know it was some of the things didn't go our way, but as long as we have a heartbeat and we're willing to get up every day and fight, that's what it's all about. So we still have life, and things there's a bright horizon. So my name is David Tyson-Smith. I represent District 46 here in Columbia, the northern part of Columbia. I've been in the House over 3 years, and I've done some pre-filing already. I have some more to do. Some of the bills that I've filed, I've got House Bill 297. That's a charter school bill. So, we talked about the education bill that came through that was basically poison for Boone County. Our schools are accredited. We didn't need the bill that pushed charter schools down our throat. And there was a charter school operation kind of working behind the scenes. They were giving out money, punishing people who didn't support this bill. It barely passed the House. We had an amendment. I had an amendment drafted last year to stop it. It was an omnibus education bill. So I filed, one of the things that it brings charter schools, allows charter schools to operate in Boone County. And so we filed a couple amendments, me and the other rest of the Boone County delegation, to require it to go to a vote if there's going to be charter schools here by district, and also just a straight repeal of it, to repeal that entire provision. And so I filed that last session as an amendment. We even got a Republican to file it. They wouldn't call him during session. They wouldn't call on me. Because they knew what we were going to do. We were going to offer that amendment. So I filed this as a bill, 2 separate bills. One, to bring it to the vote of the people. We're going to have charter schools, which I'm confident will be voted down. And 2, to completely repeal that. So the vote provision is 297. The complete repeals House Bill 298. And then I have a gun bill that I filed a few sessions ago that I refiled, House Bill 299. And what that does, it prohibits teenagers from purchasing semi-automatic weapons. And so if you look at, years ago, somebody told me, they said, a lot of times after there's a school shooting, all these bills will be filed, but they wouldn't have stopped that particular shooting. So like this kind of a grocery cart full of bills. And so I wanted to make this that would have actually stopped some shooting. So one of the most horrific ones in recent times was the Uvalde shooting in Texas, where the children were blown apart by AR-15 or AK-47, and it was so bad that even their parents couldn't identify them. They had to be identified by their shoes. And I remember, shooting an AK-47 a few years back, and the power behind that. I thought, my goodness, anyone who gets hit with this is going to get blown apart. And when I heard about Uvalde and I heard those were children, I knew that they would have been obliterated. So that was a gun that was purchased by a teenager legally. Now, to buy a handgun, you have to be 21, but you can buy an AR-15 or AK-47 younger than that, which doesn't make any sense at all. So there's already regulations for handguns, but it's looser for these more powerful military style weapons. So I refiled that. Interesting. So that would have stopped Uvalde, because that's what happened there. Someone who just went legally bought the gun in St. Louis, where there was a performing arts school where someone went in and shot up the St. Louis school. A 15-year-old girl, a lot of these details aren't talked about, had her arm blown off. She was laying out in the hall dying, while her classmates then had to walk over her body. You're talking about horrific things that happened. This was in St. Louis just a couple of years ago. Former Representative Meredith District, Buffalo, New York, where someone went in and shot a bunch of people in the supermarket. It was a teenager who had legally bought an AR-15 or an AK-47. And the interesting thing about that shooting was that the shooter didn't realize how bloody it would get, and he stopped shooting when he saw blood. So that gives you an idea of kind of where the system. So these are directly targeted at specific things that have happened that would stop future problems. Because some of these kids don't know a lot of people on the black market. They just go to a store and buy it. The interesting thing about that bill was when I filed that bill a couple of years ago, Sri Tulsa Rice showed on the radio and said, that bill's not even going to make it to the House floor. It's not going to see the light of day. That bill's going nowhere. In fact, it didn't make. I got to the House floor. I got to trick the Republicans with amendment to amendment, and I forced them to vote on it. Republicans don't want to vote on these issues. They don't want to talk about them. You would think that this would be a subject of debate. They don't want to. They don't want to talk about it because they know they're wrong about it. And they're embarrassed, and they know this is going to hurt them potentially. At the end of last session, a Republican leader told me, he said, he said something to the effect, I think we can get 20 people to come out in support of something along these lines. The problem is people are afraid to stick their necks out. Most of the people I've talked to, when I was shopping this bill around the last time, there's about 6 people that were diehard against it in the House, as far as who would have some degree of influence. Most of the Republicans, said, they didn't have a dog in the fight. They didn't really care, didn't affect their district. Someone told me, I just don't want to be the only one to stick my neck out. So that's really the issue down here. So it seems like it's very daunting proposition to get something like this passed. It's behind the curtain. It's really not as daunting as it appears. When it came to a vote, it was voted down party lines. But if you talk to people behind the curtain, the idea is, well, I just don't want to be the only one.
Mhm.
So there's about 6 people that are kind of dyed, well, they're not going to do it. Aside from those 6, everyone else is just like, well, maybe the idea is if someone else does it with me because they're afraid. I had a Republican representative tell me that something to this effect, they were considering entertaining this and maybe even supporting it. But she called me to the side later, so I need to talk to you. She said someone had texted her maybe during committee and said, I'm watching you. And she said, I'm afraid I'm going to get primaried if I do this. So that's the gun provision. I have a bill about removing the requirement for photo identification to vote. And the reason for that is people might say, well, what's the deal with photo IDs? What's the problem? A lot of these photo IDs have expiration dates, where you have a lot of people, maybe who don't drive anymore and don't have driver's licenses. So they don't have a photo ID with an expiration date, which is a problem. And one thing was just a general photo ID, but if you don't have a driver's license, you may not have a photo ID with an expiration date, which kind of tamps down people coming out to vote. Any hurdle you put in front of someone to get to the voting booth suppresses turnout. And, and I talked about this before, but, so a few years ago in Georgia, Stacey Abrams went down. It took several years. She got about 50,000 people to register to vote, registered, and they elected a Democrat U.S. Senator. So after that, that scared people to death around the country in the other party, because they thought if people are registering and voting, that's going to be a problem for us. So they passed these omnibus bills around the country. A lot of the same bills were dropped in state houses around America. They were almost identical. They dealt with photo ID issues. The one provision, which is unconstitutional, there's an injunction against it, says that if you get 10 people to register to vote, if you have 10 other people register to vote, then you have to register yourself. That's just designed to slow voting. Mm-hmm. So if you have a community event, like my daughter and I at one point would go out and put out voting registration packets on doors. Well, now you have to send something in. What if you're in a park? Where are you going to get the form and you're going to send it in somewhere? But it's just designed to slow the process down, because there's people that do not want everyone registered to vote. So I've got the photo ID bill. I also have another bill about that provision as well, which there's already an injunction against that. It may already be unconstitutional. I believe it's Judge Beadham who said there's a problem with that, and that's House Bill 301. So the two voting bills are 300 and 301. I have House Bill 302. This is something that's interesting. A lot of people don't realize about the criminal court system is that if you file a case against somebody, a felony case, the first step is a preliminary hearing. Okay, the state has to show that there's probable cause to bring the case forward. But what happens is the state often is not ready. They don't have witnesses. If you're falsely charged, they can't get their case together. The case will be dismissed. Unlike a trial. Now, if you have a trial, the case goes to a jury trial and you win, it's over. They cannot come back, it's double jeopardy, and charge you again. But at the early stages, they can keep filing the same case over and over. So if you have a case and you're innocent, you get arrested, you get drug out of work, you go to the preliminary hearing, they don't have any evidence, the case gets dismissed, the state can then refile against you, have you arrested again, drug out of work, have to post bond. So imagine paying $5,000, $10,000 bond over and over. I had a client, something similar happened to him in Randolph County, and they did it again. And so I don't remember if they had a summons. So what this does is it says you can file one more time against somebody, but you have to have a summons. So you can't rearrest them, they have to bond out. That's just not fair. And then that's it, you're done, you're capped. You can't rearrest the same person over and over and over again. So that's another bill. That's I believe that's 302. And then I have two review board bills, 303, to clean up some of the legislation that's come through recently has put a damper on our review board here. So it's designed to clean that up. I have another bill I have not filed yet it's drafted. I just need to file it that also deals with the review board issue, because over the past few years, we've seen a wave of bills that have come through and just really made it difficult for our Columbia Police Review Board to operate. The interesting thing about that is a lot of these bills are not from Jeff City, they're not designed to get at Columbia. They really don't care about Columbia. They're more interested in St. Louis review boards and whatnot. We kind of get caught in that wake, and it just has a negative impact. So there's those two bills. That is 303, then another one that has not been filed. Then I've got 304, it's the catalytic converter bills. you know there's an epidemic on the theft of catalytic converters in the state and around the country? It's gotten a little better because the prices of some of these precious metals have come down. So underneath vehicles, there's a catalytic converter that cleans up the air for auto emissions, but there's precious metals in that converter. So a lot of drug addicts will get under a vehicle, steal that, and sell it. I'm not looking, there's already a punishment for that. The problem is the metal dealers, the junk dealers that buy these, there's really not a lot of punishments for them. So this bill goes after them and says, you're going to be charged. You have to have a list of all these catalytic converters you buy. You can't just buy them knowing they're stolen. So it's designed to drive the market. It's had success. This bill was rolled into another bill. Rep. Mayhew, Aaron Crosley. It got through the House last year, and it dies in the Senate because there's a lobbyist there that's killing. So I'm confident we're going to get it through this time because I think one of the chairs of that committee is gone, so we shouldn't have an issue with that. And then I have a couple other bills that I'm looking to file. One deals with getting someone's driver's license back. So normally, if you have a certain number of DWIs, you're banned for so many years, unless you go to a DWI treatment court. Go to a DWI treatment court, you get your license back sooner. What this bill does, it says if you go to any type of treatment court, because some counties don't have DWI treatment courts. So if you go to a regular drug rehab treatment court, you may be able to be eligible to get your license back. And then I've got another bill dealing with some insurance issues, but I won't go into that. So I'm free to answer any questions anyone has, and that's kind of what's on the slate.
My head is spinning.
Yeah.
David.
Generic, good as Kathy too, but just the process. We filed a bill. Does that mean you filed it with the intention you're going to file it, or is this actually filed?
So it's filed. Yeah, it's filed. That just right. That just means that it's filed early before session starts. But it's the normal bill. So you file it, and then it's filed, and then it has to go through the committee process and get referred to a committee, get out of a committee, get to the House floor. Then it's got to go. The interesting thing about a lot of these bills, you have to walk them like a dog through every step. So you file it, but then you have to go to the speaker, hey, get this to a committee, or go to the committee chairman. Then once it gets out of a committee, then you have to, see that it gets to the House floor. Then you have to go to the floor leader and say, I want you to call my bill up. And then a lot of times they may not do that. And then you have to convert it to an amendment and then attach it to another bill and then talk to the amendment, the bill handler, and say, I want to add my bill as an amendment. And then it goes over to the Senate. Then you may have to get on a special committee over there to make sure it stays in the overall bill package to get it out.
The sausage process.
Yeah. So you have to be active all the way through.
You have to be good at gaming.
Yeah. And you have to be persistent.
David, on your voter ID bill, I just recently learned that when you get a driver's license, there are two kinds. One with the little
Real ID
up in the right-hand corner, and the other one that doesn't have it. And I was told that the one that doesn't have it cannot be used as ID. Does that affect
for voting?
Well, I don't know. It's not an official form of photo ID.
Yeah. I don't know if they won't accept that yet. I mean, I haven't heard anything about that. I would think that if you took that in and there was a problem, they would let you, rectify that. Yeah, do a provisional ballot, and you could come back with real ID. I would hope they wouldn't, if you had that, they wouldn't just completely turn your way. You wouldn't be able to do anything.
I can answer that. As an election judge, we just put driver's license. We don't. Real ID. I think the difference with real ID, and maybe it's effective now. You saw stuff on Facebook. The real ID won't be. They can't use it to get on the
airplane.
The other.
Right.
Still like May, because we just put it with my, I didn't realize that his was not a real. He did not explain very well what he means.
Let's get a couple questions off from Sarah here and online.
Ruth had a question about if the photo ID bill is successful, if the lawsuit against the present photo ID bill is successful, it's going to have some ramifications for absentee voting. And is anybody trying to patch that up with different legislation? Because wasn't that Wasn't that the bullet on that? Is that if we don't do the real
Yeah,
ID,
yeah.
then we don't get to have our no excuse?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So that was a compromise in the Senate
Yeah.
to get the voting package through, was that you would have no excuse absentee voting for 2 weeks prior to the election. So that was the carrot that passed this, which is good. I mean, I like that. I think a lot of our citizens like it. It's easier. You can get in there before, so you don't have to do it. So that could be an issue. I mean, if this goes through, is someone going to go in and remove that? I don't know. I mean, generally, once it happens, it's done. I guess somebody could say the photo ID passes or the court throws out photo ID. I guess could someone come in and then undo the 2-week provision we have as punishment, possibly. The court's able to strike down specific provisions, so they could strike down a photo ID part of it without striking down the no excuse absentee piece, which is very good. It's been great. I'm sure everyone's enjoyed that.
Do we have another?
Just chit chat.
Okay, we have another from us.
David, thank you for bringing the youth gun bill up again. And I know we've had discussions about this, and perhaps we can gain more ground on it. It's a non-election year. But my question actually refers to charter schools, dear to all of our hearts. What was the aspect that we're saying that charter school bill was unconstitutional? Was that because of the funding thing, which is different than other charter schools? I'm forgetting. And is that something to also work on?
Well, one of the issues with that, that a lot of people don't talk about, I don't know if this is what you're referring to. No one has really brought this up. I think I'm the only person who brought this up publicly, is that there's a voucher portion of this charter school bill, right? That allows you to give money or assets as a donation, and then you get a tax credit. The problem with that is it allows you to take basically get a tax benefit that's illegal, in that, say you bought stock for $25,000, your stock is increased to $50,000. But you haven't paid taxes on the increase from 25 to 50. Right? So if you sell the stock at 50, you're going to have to pay taxes on that $25,000 increase, if you're tracking me. So this allows you to purchase stock, say at 25, now it's worth 50. I can now take that 50 without paying taxes on the gains, donate it to the voucher program, and then take a $50,000 tax credit. So it allows people to take this, it's a tax dodge. It's an unconstitutional, tax benefit to shield you from paying taxes. So you can basically donate your assets that you have not paid taxes on to this voucher program and take a tax credit for the full amount of the donation, which is unconstitutional.
I think there was something else that Paul Harper was bringing up that now
there could be.
Maybe it was how it's funded, because charter schools are split with the state and the local, but the way they're proposing in Boone, that they have proposed in Boone County, is that Boone County take the entire hit for the cost of charter schools, right?
Well, I know that it's going to cost us about $15 million to do it, which is a problem. And the good news is no one has filed yet for a charter school here. So that's so that hopefully we won't have one by next year. So we're in the clear there. But it's going to be devastating financially to Columbia Public Schools.
So what would it take for the bill on voting? It would have to pass the Senate too, right?
Have House and Senate. Senator Round is not there, and he was kind of the brainchild of this. But he's been hired as a lobbyist, so he's still going to be around the building and
lobbyist for
a lobbying firm. I can't remember the name of the firm.
That answers the question.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to have to call time. This man welcomes your questions directly to him, and we want to thank him today for giving us. Because we have our man Adrian on the line here, and
I'm going to let people look at you, El Presidente, since somebody.
Kathy and David have both been my representative. Adrian never has officially, but I think I've worked with him the longest. He actually moved the office from downtown to here for us when Central Committee did that. And I worked with him for a couple, maybe 3 or more days on that project.
He also built our sign.
Well, we won't go through the list of things that Adrian has done. Right now, he is the 47th district representative for the second term, starting the second term. And I'll let you introduce yourself to the YouTube audience in any way you want. Adrian, take it away.
All right. Looks like we've got quite a few on here now. 24 looks like. That's great. My name's A. Blank. I am the representative of the 47th House District, which includes Sturgeon, Harrisburg, Rocheport, and the west side of Columbia. So after they redistricted, it helped me win. They had to keep the districts in as few counties as possible, which meant that happened through Clean Missouri. That's one provision that was kept through the legislature, which means they had to cut 3 slivers off of my district and draw me further into Columbia, which allows me to win. Still the most, other than the 44th, which is hard to win, virtually impossible, but mine would be the closest by the numbers in Boone County. And I do have the most rule of any Democrat in the state, which I'm proud of. So I'm at the Capitol right now. I came up to file a bill. And so we've got lots of things working. So I'll start off with like the first bill that I filed, which is HB 190. It's related to campaign finance. It's one I file every year. It essentially takes super PACs down to the same regulations as a PAC, which means you can trace the dollars. They can only spend so much, and it keeps those to those same provisions. We've seen how Citizens United has treated us in the past. That's how our judges got bought at the Supreme Court, and how women lost their rights. And I think we could see that a mile coming because of that Citizens United provision that was pushed by the Koch brothers. And the amount of money that gets spent in elections is ridiculous. So I think that's just, I don't have high hopes that they'll bring that to the floor or to a committee, just because that's how they win elections. They pander to big money. So that's one. We'll see if anything happens with it this year. HB 191. I filed 4 bills the same day. So HB 191, which is the bill that got the furthest last year for me. It was just a compost awareness week. It correlates with the federal holiday, and it just it's just a time of the year that we acknowledge composting and the importance of composting, and it's there just to encourage the ability for people to lift it up. And it went through committee last year. It almost made it all the way through. I got it on a Senate bill and worked kind of around the House a little bit. So I went through the House, got it through committee. They weren't going to bring it to the floor, so I put it on a Senate bill. I had some folks in the Senate help me with that. And if they wouldn't have filibustered, I'm sure it would have passed. But they really screwed up a lot of things last year. So we got to work it again. The third bill is HB 192. It modifies provisions for net metering. As you know, whenever you put solar panels on your house, they like to charge you extra fees for being on the grid. And this here allows people with solar panels to maximize their credits when going through your major co-ops. Which, if you're going to produce your own electricity and be on the grid, you should be getting paid for it. Again, that's another big wish of mine. I also have another clean energy bill. It modifies the definition of renewable energy resources, which is currently defined. And all I did with that bill is include hydro pumping electricity with underwater turbines. We have 2 major rivers. We could be using underwater turbines as clean energy, out of sight, out of mind. They whine about windmills and solar panels and all this other stuff, but there's other ways to create electricity just the same. So I just added that to that provision. Of course, I've got a firearms bill too, and I like how Kathy did her firearms bill. She went to the NRA website. So, and the reasons for those different type of strategies is, well, you can say, well, the NRA says that's okay. So we ought to be able to pass legislation to do it, right? Well, what mine does is undo all the regulations that they took away for gun rights. So safe storage and background checks and all that stuff, and reinstates everyone that they've done away with, right? And the reason I went with that strategy is because they were there. Gun violence and deaths are up in Missouri, and we had these laws before, so they're not unconstitutional because we had them before. You all decided just to get rid of them. So those are just different types of strategies to try and get our gun bills to committees, just to kind of throw it back in their faces type of deal. What else here? HB 659, which the University of Missouri has really put their thumbs on the lower working class when it comes to university help, and they've taken away some days, paid days off, and so one of those days, which is Veterans Day, they don't have as a paid day off anymore. And so Stephen Weber introduced the bill in the Senate, and I'm introducing it in the House. And so the notion is to work them together from both sides, and hopefully they'll meet in the middle and make it to the finish line. We're in a situation where with the university, they don't always make great decisions, especially when it comes to what I call the introductory level positions when it comes to taking care of the facilities and lawn work and all this other stuff, which is union. They've really kind of gone after their benefits here in the last few years. You've seen what they've done with parking, but we're in a situation where Republicans really leverage the university to their will, and so that means they pander to those Republicans instead of doing what should be better decision making. And so we try to, and supporting the university also means supporting the people who work there, and not just the establishment and the people at the top. And so there's kind of a balance there to not piss off the university, and to make sure that you're supporting all aspects, not just the university funding, which is always necessary. But whenever you're using the lower level to gain financial benefit, instead of advocating for more money at the state to pay your employees better or keep their benefits, it becomes a tricky deal. So I've been looking through the bills here, and one thing I noticed that kind of stirred me is that there was not a foreign ownership of Missouri land bill in the state house filed, which is dumbfounding to me. There's 2 filed in the Senate and nothing in the House. And so, and I know when Crystal was here, she had one, Crystal Quaid, and so I didn't have to file one. So I just got behind hers. So I filed my foreign ownership bill today. That's why I drove up here today, to get it on so we can start working it. We had Mr. Hefner on Ag Committee. He's not here no more, and he put a lot of effort into that foreign ownership bill. His stance on that foreign ownership bill was, well, we can't have Chinese corporations buying land close to our military bases, which, okay, that has credit. But my problem with foreign ownership of Missouri land is not only do they own our land, they own our hogs, they own our beef, they own every aspect of it. So they've monopolized the system. So when you monopolize the system, that's bad in itself. But when you monopolize our system to foreign corporations, that's even worse. I mean, they're really going to get us from within. And I don't think it's one thing to do business with foreign corporations and foreign nations and make sure the world gets fed, but they don't get to own our resources. And so that's the reason for that bill. And of course, I've co-sponsored David Tyson-Smith's bill, got behind his bills when it comes to charters, both of his bills. And so that's what I've got actually filed right now. Things that I'm working on, things that don't have a whole lot to do, at least to this point, legislatively. Obviously, I'm trying to lift up the hemp industry. The hemp industry is something that we ought to be leading in. We can replace all plastic products with hemp. Of course, that doesn't include all the paper. We can stop cutting down trees and start using hemp to use paper products. Just the plastic part of it alone would do a lot for our environment and our planet. But there's so many aspects to it that it's hard to come up with a bill to help lift that whole industry up, because there's so many things it can do. Hemp's a weed, so it can grow just about anywhere. It takes virtually little water and no chemicals. Since it's a weed, it grows anywhere. And so we ought to be leading in that industry, because we used to be at one point leading in that industry back in the Civil War days. So, and with that, I've got other things I'm working. You all know Jackie Sample. Yes, she's running for 3rd Ward council person. Been working with her for the last couple of years. Right now, when you're talking about schooling, public schools, IEPs is a big issue, and the paperwork and work that gets put into IEPs, which is basically, say, if you got a kid who's having trouble developing or understanding homework, or progressing, then they put them on an IEP and put them in a program to help them get through that. Well, it's a lot of paperwork, a lot of time for teachers to do. So I've been working with Jackie Sample as an occupational therapist to maybe cut some of this IEP stuff down a little bit, so you can have your kids meet with an occupational therapist with your parents and say, hey, here's some directions you ought to take, things you can work on at the home, because we feel like that if you can work through these educational issues with them at home, there's a lot of stuff that the teachers won't have to go through, and a lot of stuff can be handled at the home. So we're working on. I got a meeting with DESE on the 13th. We're going to work on a program right now. They have a program with elementary school students that's a temporary program that's getting ready to expire, when kids learn how get taught how to grow food in the elementary school level. Kids learn quite a bit when they're young. So one thing I like to do when I was young was play in the dirt. Might as well let them play in the dirt and learn how to grow food. And so there's a temporary program now. We're going to try and make it permanent. So we want to add the occupational therapist. We want to continue this program. We're going to meet with DESE to find out what they need to add an occupational therapist to DESE as the expert to help all these other school districts. And actually, Jackie Sample has written a program and steps in a process on how that should work. And so those are 2 issues that we're working directly with DESE on. What am I missing? Let's see here. I'm working on a clean air bill. We have, and where this came from is I've got casino workers who are tired of working in a smoke-filled room, and they've come to me with a clean air group and said, hey, we want to put together a bill that keeps people from smoking in our casinos. Now, obviously, smokers won't like that. I see it as a long run deal. When it comes to our healthcare, I smoked cigarettes for 17 years. I haven't smoked since 2011. Well, it made a health impact on my life from there on, because it's, I have breathing issues depending on the time of year. Obviously, most people do, but that smoking that I had kind of elevated that and creates an extra cost on healthcare that we need to quit paying for. And so we need people to be healthy. And if this type of bill encourages people to stop smoking, it's better for all of us. So any questions?
Yes, Adrian, you're able to stay a little past 1 o'clock today?
Yeah.
You are? Okay, good. I should have asked you that earlier, but as long as you can hang around, we can deal with some questions.
Yeah.
Dave Mallory in the back has one.
Can you hear me, Adrian, over there? I'm way away.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Just some background information. You mentioned earlier, I'm not familiar with this, something about union workers not able
You cut out right there when you had something to say there. Union workers so you want to ask about union workers at the university? Something's not happening there. I can't hear you.
About union workers not being able to park on campus.
Well, what's happening is it's not just for union workers, it's employees in general at the university. They're charging them for parking. So when you go to work, at the university, you've got two options. You can pay $100 to park to work close to where you work, or you can pay $25 and walk 3 miles. And so they take that out of the employees' paychecks. Well, the problem with that is they're paying for their parking garages. The employees are. And so whenever they're not paying what I would consider a living wage, and they're going to take another $100 a month out of their checks, that's a big deal. And so and then want to penalize them if they're late to work because they had to walk however far to work. And I don't, I'm a union guy. I'm always early, and there shouldn't be any excuses for that. But whenever they make it harder for them to get there and then take money out of their check to pay for that parking, they should be paying for that themselves. So they're talking about adding carts to get people back and forth and that sort of thing. But those are some of those bad decisions they make. But a lot of that stuff they're forced into. We don't fund them the way we're supposed to, and so they got to try and find a way to do it. And that's one way they're doing it, and I don't agree with it. So,
do we have any on the?
We unpin them so we can see everybody. Tillamus, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Mine was more of a statement. I don't know whether bingo games still have smoke.
I would say they do. We're working on this bill now. I've got they're supposed to send that revised bill. We've been working on it for a couple months. I've got several people involved in it just to make sure everything's right before we get it filed. But
you might consider that.
Yes, and I think that's in there too. But I'll be able to look it over. I was hoping I would have it today. And I sent them a text and they said they're still working on it. So I imagine it'll be first of the week before I see it. But yes, there's several different. Casinos is not the only one.
Okay, good.
I have one.
Yeah.
Adrian, Kathy Stenhoff's bill about the $5,000 for each teacher kind of connected to me to your ideas about the grid, that these are about electrical grid and solar panels. These are issues that can work very well in our rural communities, I think. I don't know if you'll be able to sell people in rural communities on hemp. I hope so. But but it seems like the $5,000 for your teacher and the grid, because rural communities get hit pretty big sometimes with those contractors who are wanting to do that there. Seems to me. Is that your experience?
Yeah, see that, the rural community really gets kind of, for lack of a better word, screwed on some things. Even with getting grant money, they got to have a match. A lot of times they just don't have the tax income to match those grants. So it's something that I haven't mentioned yet. So one of my priorities is funding for Roachport, Sturgeon, and Harrisburg. And so Harrisburg needs about a little over $1 million for their wastewater treatment plant expansion. Sturgeon needs $1 million for their wastewater treatment plant expansion. They're tapped out. They can't add homes or businesses in those areas whatsoever because they're tapped out. The Sturgeon's got one new neighborhood, and they will be over capacity when that subdivision is complete. And so advocating in the budget, which I think is kind of something we haven't really heard about, right? The other two really didn't talk a whole lot about budget. And I think it's because it's pretty hopeless. But I'm still going to try to get some stuff in budget. And in Roachport, they've got a big flooding issue. They want to build a floodwater retaining wall there on the Katy Trail so they don't lose their businesses there. And that's another million. So you're talking $3 to $4 million there that I need to get in budget. The problem with budget in the House is if I want $4 million, they want a balanced budget, which means I got to take $4 million from other people's projects, and they call that balanced. The problem is that is now their projects don't get done and mine do, which, you know, they're not going to do mine because I'm a Democrat. So they want us to find money other places in the budget that may not be getting utilized. And then whenever you bring it up in the committee or on the House floor, they say, well, we just don't have the money. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there for a Democrat to get something in the budget, but that doesn't keep me from trying.
We have at least one on.
Evan? Yeah. Evan, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Everybody. This isn't a question, this is more of a statement, and it goes back to Kathy and David talking about charter schools. I just wanted to make the point that Jobs with Justice met in October. There was about 20 of us that met and called ourselves Champions for Public Education. And so we're brainstorming ways to advocate and get out in front of our, maybe make a speakers bureau, anything like that. So if people who are on this call are interested in chipping in, helping out in that cause, not chipping in money, but helping in that effort, send me an email. I put it in chat. I can put it in chat again, my email address.
Thank you.
So, can you clarify what you mean, get out and speak on the education issue, the charter issue? I'm not clear.
Yes, in opposition to the formation of charter schools. In other words, raising public education. We don't have any actual leverage right now. It's like, there's no vote that they have to pass to approve it. So, and the way I understand it, nothing will happen in 2025 because it would have to be filed before
That's right.
Of 2024. So we've got a year pause, but if we, write letters to the editor or just do things that are just let it be known that we're watching this and we don't like it and we're prepared to speak against it and, stuff like that. So
don't be afraid to use our bills that we filed. I didn't file one because I knew David was filing, so I co-sponsored his bills. But you're welcome to use if you want to write a letter to the editor, use our bills and say, hey, support these bills, or call your legislatures or whatever. Don't hesitate. That's all helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. The thinking and planning of Jobs with Justice is always of very big importance in our work. Do we have one more question we can go for?
There's a Steve Calloway one. Did we talk about that? Pharmacy benefit managers?
No.
Okay. Steve asks in the chat, he says, you will again see bills regarding pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. I know session has not started, but do you have any updates to your thoughts on this since last year? Thanks for that question, Steve.
Yeah, we're in a tough spot when it comes to PBMs. So I don't like PBMs. They're what I call a third party, which means they're just in it for their own benefit. So what happens is they say, and they go out and they negotiate drug prices. That's what a PBM does. And they say, hey, we saved you all this much money. But what they don't tell you is what the PBMs has also marked up and said, hey, they don't, this is not something they just give you information. We negotiated this price. We're adding our profits to it. And then we're going to, tell you this is what you get it for. And so what happens is you're paying another third party profits. Now, I would like to get rid of PBMs completely. I would. It needs to be done at the federal level. And the reason for that is because we don't have the willpower here at the state, for one. The unions, the carpenters union, would like to get rid of PBMs, but they can't. because they don't have the resources to negotiate drug prices. So if they get rid of the PBMs, then they feel like it will cost the members more money because they won't be able to just have the resources to spend to negotiate every drug price out there. And so we have problem with labor. Not that it's a problem, it's just that there's not a solution behind getting rid of PBMs. And so that needs to be done at the federal level.
Alice?
So this is not a sexy issue, but it's really a bipartisan issue. Adrian, I was reading my old Missourians when I was gone in Thailand, and it was about roads and bridges in Missouri.
Mhm.
Now, Biden has offered a bunch of money. I don't know how aggressively we're going after it in Missouri, but this went over, we're the 7th biggest road and bridge system in the country, but we're 48th funding. So wouldn't this be an opportunity, particularly for rural areas, for a bipartisan effort to get more funding for public safety?
I don't know, can you all see this map?
Sort of, yeah.
So this map tells me what roads that the DOT are going to concentrate on in certain years. And so we do have at least roads. It doesn't say anything about bridges. But we're going to have in 2025, you're going to have Route V, which is up towards Sturgeon, get repaved. 63 has already been done. And we're also going to have VV, which is out off of 763 out there. It's supposed to be repaved. Route E, which goes to Harrisburg, is supposed to be done. And so those are in the futures. It also has 2027, but that's Highway 22 and 2027, which is at the very top border of Boone County. If you're familiar with 22 Highway, it goes to Sturgeon and Centralia. And so there's no projections for 2028 yet that I can see, but and those projects are included with some of that federal funding.
Yeah, but 48th in funding, I mean.
Yes, and we've always been per mile. We're always down at the bottom per mile that we spend on road maintenance. And we are, like you said, one of the highest, most road heavy states around. And you know, we're in the center of everything. 70 and 63, we're at the center of everything, and those roads need to be proper, and all the roads leading off of those for economic development ought to be top notch too.
Maybe we should just let them all go to hell and get some public transit. Going bullet
Okay,
transit.
we have to take our last
Thank
question.
you.
Huh? Yeah.
Sue and Herb, do you want to unmute and ask?
I can't miss the chance, Adrian, to thank you and to thank all three of you, and hope you'll pass this on.
Well,
I hope I speak for all Muleskinners here. You are, as a corps, exemplary. Your diligence and attention to legislation, your service to constituents should be a model throughout the state. Thank you all and every very much. Thank you, not just for this presentation, but for all you do.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
That is a great sum up of what I want to say. To say we're proud is an understatement. We're great. We have a few items of business. I don't know if Pam's able to